Well, hello, Berkeley Haas. It's great to see that we have a sold-out room here for our very special Dean Speaker Series here in our speaker forum and our lovely Chu Hall, and that we have thousands of alumni who are joining us through our live stream. So hello, the alumni out there. My name is Courtney Chandler. I'm the Senior Assistant Dean, Chief Strategy and Operating Officer here at Haas. I'm also a proud double bear and an alumna of our MBA program, so go Bears. So glad you guys did that. It's an honor to welcome everyone to our special Dean Speaker Series with our brand new Berkeley leader, Dean Ann Harrison, and our former Dean, Laura Tyson. It's very exciting to have these two incredibly accomplished and inspiring women leaders together on this stage today. Just in her 6th week on the job, Dean Harrison formally joined Berkeley Haas as our new dean on January 2nd. I'm sure that you have all read a lot about her background and are eager to hear more from her. So today we will hear about her thoughts and visions for Berkeley Haas, learn more about her leadership style, and hear about her take on our distinctive culture. Laura Tyson, as you know, graciously stepped in as interim dean last fall and is now back in her role as the faculty director for our Institute for Business and Social Impact. We felt there was no better way to welcome Ann than to have Laura facilitate a discussion with her today, one dean to another. Before I turn it over to Laura, Laura and Ann, I want to give, for their fireside chat, I just wanted to give a quick reminder that be thinking about questions that you might have as the conversation unravels and we hear more about what they have to say. So there'll be plenty of time at the end for some questions from our audience here. As you know, if you've been to these events before, we have microphones on either side, so that's where the questions will take place. And with that, Laura, I'll hand it over to you to kick off the fireside chat.
Thank you very much, Courtney. And let me just recognize Courtney right away. So one of us, I had the opportunity to serve as interim dean. And Ann has the great opportunity to serve as dean, but we have a fabulous support staff that works with us, and Courtney is definitely one of those, so thank you, Courtney. So, let's start by talking about you as a leader, Ann. You've taught on both coasts. You've taught at Berkeley. You've taught at Wharton and Columbia. You've held a leadership position at the World Bank. You've had a significant leadership journey. Is there any person is there a leader that you've most admired or has influenced you in your career to this point?
Well, in terms of people that I actually worked with, I worked with two different leaders in my years at the World Bank, and they both made an enormous impression on me. One was Justin Lin, who I worked with very closely for 2 years, and who came from China, where he was a dean at Peking University. And the other one was Bob Selig, who was the head of the World Bank. He was the president of the World Bank while I was there, and I got to know both of them and respected them a lot. But they were really very different, and I learned a lot from both of them. So let me just start with Justin. Some of you, I recognize you from the staff town hall, and you've heard this story before, but I'll say it again anyway. So Justin Lin is a survivor. He was a rising star in the Taiwanese military. He was 27 years old. His wife was expecting a baby. And he looked across the ocean, and he realized that Taiwan was quite small, but China was very big, and that he would have many more leadership opportunities in China. And so one night, and nobody knows whether he told his wife this or not, but one night he got in the water and literally swam to China. He defected from the Taiwanese military. To this day, if Justin ever sets foot in Taiwan, he will be executed. And so he left. He left everything he had. When I asked him once, how did you get there? How did you swim? He said, well, I held on to a basketball the whole time. That's what he told me.
Wow.
I don't know if that's really true. But anyway, so Justin's a survivor,
Yes.
right? And Justin went from one country to another country, rose in the ranks, became a member of the group of 200, and survived all sorts of different leaders in the Chinese government, and is still doing very well today. And he came to the World Bank. He was the first chief economist from China that the World Bank had. He gets there, and he discovers that his boss, the World Bank president, is a Republican appointee who believes that China is fixing their exchange rate. And he has to learn how to operate comfortably and happily, and he did it. And so I watched the two of them in their very different approaches. Justin was extraordinarily patient, very much under the radar, but managed to get what he wanted very quietly, extraordinarily diplomatically, day by day working on his agenda. Bob Selig came in, and he had some very different approaches. He was very abrupt, didn't believe in social niceties, just wanted to get the job done. But he was also extraordinarily successful. Instituted 8 a.m. stand-up meetings with the entire top staff. We would have to go those every morning at 8 o'clock. If you made a suggestion, then you had to implement it. So it was interesting, because at the beginning, people talked a lot. And then after a while, they realized that they better be prepared to volunteer. I love Bob Selig because he came in, saw that we had a very undiverse leadership, and decided to change it. And before Bob Selig, when somebody would get appointed to be a director or a vice president, the president would just automatically stamp their approval. But then he realized that he had veto power. And so he started vetoing candidates who weren't diverse. Now, there's another interesting story, which I don't think I did tell at the town hall, which is when he got my appointment on his desk. I didn't tell this story, right?
Okay, I don't know.
He got my appointment on his desk, and he looks down, he looks at my CV, and he says, oh my God, she went to Berkeley.
Berkeley. Right, yeah.
No way, I am not going to approve this appointment. And he turned it down. He really did. He turned it down. So it went back to Justin Lin. But Justin Lin, remember, Justin's a survivor, and he's a guy who knows how to make things happen. And he looks at me, and he says, I insist that you're going to get appointed. He says, I'll convince him to meet you. Because he was so sure that I could charm Bob Selig that as long as he met me face to face, everything would be solved.
Okay.
So I ended up meeting Bob Selig. Walk into his office, and I'm like, I'm really worried because I'm either going to make it or I'm going to be fired the next day, right? Mm-hmm. So I walk in there, I'm looking my conservative best, right, to dispel this image of a Berkeley professor. And we sit down, and he said, so, what did you study in college? I thought, wow, this is a weird way to start, with the president of the World Bank. And he says, and I say, I studied history, because that was the first thing I studied at UC Berkeley. I started as a history major. And he says, really? He says, I was a history major too.
There you go.
And that was, the beginning of a beautiful relationship. So that's it on people I admire. And I admire both of them. They completely disagreed in terms of policy, but they found a way to get along. And I learned a lot from watching the two of them.
So a couple of things come to mind from that story. Number one is there will be in the next few months, or maybe even few weeks, the announcement of a new head of the World Bank. So the current head of the World Bank has decided to step down a bit early in his term. And the power of appointment right now, although it's politically very controversial in the world, rests with the U.S. government, so that means it rests with the Trump administration to choose the next head of the World Bank. And by part of this deal, as you know, is that the Europeans choose the head of the International Monetary Fund and the U.S. chooses the head of the World Bank. And the rest of the world is thinking, really? I mean, these are global institutions. There are plenty of really great candidates out there. There's a woman who's been finance minister of Kenya who even the last time around when the U.S. chose Dr. Kim, a lot of people felt they should have chosen Ngozi. So it's really interesting to hear this story now because just follow this issue of who's going to be. I've seen various lists that have been suggested that the Trump administration may be thinking of. But that's number one, is just the power of appointment. So Bob Selig was appointed by the President Bush, and I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to hear that you ended up working well with him, and sorry to hear that he thought that there was a reason why he might not appoint you because you were associated with Berkeley. That's disturbing, but I'm glad you convinced him otherwise. The other thing, just in passing, so years ago, I also worked for the World Bank, always on a contractual basis. I was never there for a long-term appointment. But the person who first got me involved in the World Bank was a woman who actually was a professor at Cal, Professor Irma Edelman. And Professor Irma Edelman was the person who first got me involved with the World Bank. So there is a Berkeley tradition of women associated with the World Bank, and I think it's really interesting to imagine that we had many decades ago now Professor Irma Edelman, who was the person representing Cal at the World Bank. All right, so let's go to risk. So in order to move on in leadership positions, oftentimes you have to take a decision which has a lot of risk associated with it. So why don't you talk a little bit about your attitude towards risk and maybe a big risk you took that worked out?
Yeah, so my trajectory as a professional, and I'll talk about the biggest personal risk I took, but first I'll talk about the biggest professional risks. Mm-hmm. My trajectory as professionally has been just one set of bizarre choices by conventional standards in the following sense. I started at Berkeley. I studied history. I went off to Sacramento for the summer in the Cal in Sacramento program, and I realized that people weren't talking about history. They were talking about economics. So I promptly changed, well, I didn't change my major. I added economics.
You added a major. Yeah.
I added a major, and I went and I took Econ 1. And it was this brilliant professor. It should have been Laura, because I've heard she's had the same impact on people. They take Econ 1, and they fall in love with Econ. I took Econ 1 with somebody named Richard Such.
He was great. He was my mentor. As an Econ 1 professor, Richard Such was my mentor.
Oh, yeah, he was amazing.
He was amazing.
I fell in love with economics. Those guys in Sacramento were right. I should have been studying it. And then proceeded to study that. But I was really more of a historian, and then I thought I was going to go to law school. But one of my mentors at Berkeley, so this is another bizarre story. So I really shouldn't tell this story, but I will anyway.
Go for it. The more
So believe it or not, I had the most bizarre set of jobs at Berkeley. I guarantee I had more bizarre jobs than anyone in this room. So I worked in an ice cream store. I worked as a caterer, opening bottles of champagne.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that one was okay. And then I actually worked as a waitress at a place that finally closed after 50 years, a place called Kips. Has anybody been to Kips?
Kips, of course. Yes, yes.
Okay, so this is deeply embarrassing. I really shouldn't be saying all these things. But anyway, at some point I decided, well, I'm smart. Maybe I should do something that uses my brains. So I went to the economics department, and there was a posting to be a teaching assistant for an econ class. Even though I was an undergraduate, this wonderful professor hired me, and he convinced me to go and get a PhD in economics. So his name was Leo Simon. Some of you may know him.
Simon, yes.
And he changed my life. The problem is, so off I go. So that was a really risky thing, because economics at Princeton was all math. all math, all math.
All math.
And remember, I was really more of a history major, so I had a horrible time there. I had such a horrible time after 2 years of graduate school, and I'm not going to talk about my grades in graduate school. They are unmentionable. After 2 years of graduate school, I said, this is all math. This is not related to the real world. I'm leaving, okay? So then I went off to the World Bank. Another strange thing. Nobody ever did that. Loved the World Bank. Finished my PhD eventually. And then everybody in academics usually goes and get an academic job, but it just didn't strike me as very interesting. So off I went to the World Bank. That was really bizarre. The professors didn't like you to do that. After I'd been at the World Bank for 5 years, I decided I wanted to be an academic. People didn't do that either. So it's just, you know, people don't go from the World Bank to academics, and I've just done so many unusual things.
You did the reverse order. So
the reverse,
yes, basically people will go academics and then maybe do World Bank and then go back.
But that's not actually, I mean, none of that is particularly risky. I would say the riskiest thing I've ever done, and this is a personal thing, is marrying my husband.
Well, that's a personal one, yes. And we can't assess that, but you know that.
So, yeah, I mean, so my husband and I come from two totally different worlds, okay? My husband, he was raised in the Philippines, different family, different culture, different religion. Came here when he was already kind of fully formed at 17, I'd say. And I was raised here in the Bay Area, grew up in Pinole, and you can't imagine two more different people. Getting married was such an act of faith, okay? But the thing is, it turns out that he has been a wonderful husband, and we're still married.
And your parents, you have children.
We have children, and so that's probably the biggest risk I ever took.
So I think the professional risk, so the personal risk, I suspect that, yes, marriage is oftentimes personal risk. Personal opportunity and personal risk, okay? In this case, it sounds like it worked out. Professional risk, I didn't realize this about you, and it's really interesting. We have some parallels here. I mean, that notion of all of a sudden leaping into econ graduate school, that's a really big jump there. That you basically, econ graduate school is, when I first got to econ graduate school, I said, this is not the discipline I used to study. I studied econ at Smith College. It was kind of history, social science. And I went to MIT, and all of a sudden it was bordered Hessians and matrices. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this actually isn't for me. And at that point, and that's why somebody like Leo Simon is important, there are professors in one's life who actually keep you going. So I suspect there was something like that at Princeton, too. People will just say, this is for you. It's not a one-size-fit-all approach. You can do this if you want. Anyway, there's a lot of support that's available. So
there was no support.
No, not true? All right. I'm sorry to hear that. I am sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope our professors around here do a better job of offering support, because in my case, I came very, very close a couple of times to quitting MIT PhD program, and in both times it was professors who actually convinced me not to, and who said, you really can do this. It's not like you need to look like everybody else or sound like everybody else or ask the same questions as everybody else. You can have your own way of doing it. I also think it was important, and I don't know how you feel about this in your own life. In my life, when I was making that decision, that was the height of the first feminist movement. Really, it was called then women's liberation. It wasn't called feminism at that point. And Gloria Steinem was a voice out there. And I actually once met her a couple of years ago, and I said, I couldn't quit because you were out there saying women can do whatever they need to do, and you need to do this, and you need to keep going. And I said, whenever I sort of thought about quitting, there was your voice out there saying, don't. So I don't know if you felt that in the world, because economics when you were at Princeton must have still been predominantly a male profession. Do you feel like...
Yes, and the sad thing is that at most of the top economics PhD programs, it's still predominantly a male profession. In fact, it's gotten more male-dominated as the professions got more mathematical. I think what saved me was actually going out and working. And you'd go out and you'd work and you'd see, wow, I go to India and I meet the prime minister and I have something to say that can actually solve problems in real time. And it was that experience after 2 years of graduate school that gave me the energy to go back.
Great, that's fantastic. Oh, well, that's a good segue to defining leadership principles, because if you say you're dealing with the Prime Minister of India, say, you're dealing with thinking beyond yourself and thinking about helping a society move forward. So we have this distinctive culture, and I'd like to get your thoughts about this. Do you think the distinctive culture is playing or can play a role in creating a different kind of leader? So you've met different kinds of leaders. We're trying to cultivate leaders with this set of principles. Why don't you talk a little bit about defining leadership principles and leadership creation?
So I think one of the things that I've discovered in my first 30 days here is how important your principles are in leadership. I mean, I was told this over and over again, but I didn't realize quite how important it is to have a really rigorous set of principles, because you're being asked to make decisions every day that really test your very core. But I did think you were going to ask me what my favorite leadership principle was.
Well, I assume you're going to get to which one you like. So, which one you find most challenging and which one fits you the best?
Well, as you can tell from my various moving around, students always pretty much defines who I am. Right. And I just love learning. And I think that's what's so wonderful about being at Berkeley and being at this university. Everyone's interested in learning constantly. But confidence without attitude I really love too, because one of the things, I'm sure you've probably gone to both coasts. The two coasts, it's so funny because they're in the same country, but they couldn't be more different. I see it resonates with somebody.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, the East Coast, I hate I mean, it's okay to have attitude on the East Coast. I mean, it's just, I love the East Coast, really. But it's really okay. And California is really about confidence without attitude. I mean, at least that's what I've seen. That's what I've seen at Haas. And I just love that combination. It's so powerful to me. So I really love confidence without attitude. But as you can probably tell from my trajectory, beyond yourself is the one, of course, that resonates the most with me.
So I'm thinking a little bit about going back to Mr. Selig and his view that maybe he didn't want someone from Berkeley. One of the things I think is really true about the defining leadership principles is we've actually articulated them, but they were embedded in the culture of this university. They've been, I think, a sort of defining part of this university from the very beginning. So I don't know which one he didn't like, whether it was question the status quo or confidence without attitude, but I really do think this is a public institution. It is an institution with a public mission. It has always been a progressive institution. California has stood for innovation and a progressive, developing new ways of thinking about it. And I think one of the wonderful things about the defining leadership principles is we've articulated it with something that was actually there. And I think the university, I know I've heard Carol Christ use some of these principles in her discussion of what Berkeley is. So it's the ability to actually say what it is and then to inspire others. It's really very exciting. Very exciting. So you didn't talk about what, and maybe you don't want to, when you were talking about the East Coast, and it's okay to have attitude. What's the attitude that you were referring to?
Maybe I'll skip that question.
You'll skip that question. So let's return to your motivation for coming back to Berkeley. So I didn't realize you were from Pinole, so you're a great California girl. You're here. You spent a lot of time here as a student, as a professor, and now you're back. So what's the motivation? Is Berkeley always been a part of your life that you want to maintain? How do you feel about this East Coast, West Coast person you've become?
So I mean, I've always loved Berkeley. I'm just a passionate graduate of this institution, and I love teaching here. And my husband, who I still think was the right person to marry, pulled me away from here, kicking and screaming in, I guess it was 2009. And I really didn't want to leave. So we did it for family reasons. Our children have now gone off to college, so I'm now free to do whatever I want, more or less. So I came back because this is the place I really love. But I mean, I think independent of my own personal love of the place, this is the place everyone wants to be. So I was teaching at Wharton for the last 7 years. And so many students at Wharton wanted to be right here that they had to set up a campus in San Francisco.
I did set up.
Right?
Right.
I mean, everyone wants to be here. This is it. This is the center of the universe. And it's also the most beautiful place ever. I'm a big hiker. I just love the outdoors. You can see the Campanile. The place is beautiful. It's exciting, but it's not just that. It's also, I mean, if it was just that, I mean, I could have gone off to Stanford, right? It has all the same qualities. I was offered admission to Stanford both as an undergraduate and to their law school, and of course turned it down. But why Berkeley and not Stanford? I think the public mission of this university is so incredibly important. We have such an important role to play. This is, I believe, the only business school in the top 10 ranked business school that's public university. I mean, it's pretty incredible. And Berkeley has always been and will continue to be at the forefront of some just incredibly important initiatives, including this culture initiative that we're celebrating today, which combines a mission-driven education with business. Let me just give you 2 very specific examples of the kind of things that make me so excited to be here. There have been a study was recently done by actually an econ professor and a Stanford professor together looking at mobility. And what they did is they looked at which universities in the United States are most likely to help people move from different parts of the income distribution. In particular, one thing they looked at is if you were in the bottom 20% of the income distribution when you were young, and then you rose, in which university would you be more likely to go from the bottom 20% to the top 1% among all the universities in the United States? And you can guess the number 1 place to go to was Berkeley.
Wow.
Right?
That's great. That's fantastic. I didn't know that. Fantastic. That's great.
So, I mean, that's the kind of place I want to be at. But it's, I mean, there's so many different aspects of Berkeley, which we're going to move on to the next question. But in my mind, 2 of the biggest societal challenges right now are this enormous increase in inequality that the U.S. is facing. We're now the most unequal industrial country in the world. We are right below Mexico and Brazil. So we're more unequal than we've been in 100 years. So the fact that we're playing a deep role in increasing social mobility is important. But the other big challenge to me, at least my opinion, I'm sure you have others, is climate change. And when I was a professor here, I taught in the College of Natural Resources. College of Natural Resources is, in my opinion, and it's also in the opinion of all the rankings agencies, the best place probably not only in the United States, but possibly in the world to study environmental change. And one of my goals is to link what we're doing here at Haas with what CNR is doing right down the road. And they are also very involved with day-to-day stuff. So faculty there, some of whom are in the room right now, are meeting with the governor, trying to figure out how to stop wildfires in California. They're trying to figure out what the solution to the water problem is in California. So I just think this is an incredible university with a very important public mission, and I really believe in that.
Great. All right, let me ask one other question, and then we'll open up to the audience. And it actually does go to the more observations about your experience here. You've been here 5 weeks, and maybe some of your initial thoughts about your vision for Haas and your priorities. So here you are. You're the dean, what's your sense of priorities? I know you're going to a very important meeting right after this because you told me that, but I mean, some of the priorities you inherited, but talk a little bit about your own sense of how you allocate your scarce time among competing priorities at Haas and the university.
Well, I mean, it would be wrong if I didn't start with the following sentence. Haas is in phenomenal shape. And Rich Line is sitting right there. And I think, Rich, you should stand up. So Rich led the effort to bring us to Hall, which, as we can all see for ourselves, I mean, is just simply incredible. When I first came here in the spring, it really brought tears to my eyes. It's such a beautiful place. We have the defining leadership principles, which, as you can tell, Rich, are thriving in our daily dialogue. Delphine Sherman, I don't think she's here, but our CFO is leading us. We're very healthy, particularly relative to the rest of campus. We've been generating surpluses. Our reputational ranking is at an all-time high. But of course, there are challenges on the horizon. There's flattening demand for a graduate business school education, certainly by looking at the numbers. There's a flight to quality, and since we're quality, we have benefited from some of that flight to quality. But as my dean at Wharton told me in a very late night dinner, he said, we're on this island. He was talking about the business school deans and the business school. He says, we're on this island and the water's rising. That's the way he described it to me. The business education is changing. It's more experiential. And we haven't had an increase in the number of ladder faculty either at Haas or the rest of campus. In 40 years, whereas the number of students has gone up 20 to 30%. So that's a big increase in the ratio of students to ladder faculty. So I've spoken to many of the people in the room about my priorities, but maybe some of you have not heard it. I'd like to grow the faculty and the areas that we work on, particularly in 3 areas: entrepreneurship, data analytics, and environment and business. I would really like to take advantage of being in the middle of Berkeley and take advantage of all the other degree programs. And Rich has done an amazing job in starting that journey. He created, along with the rest of the faculty, some wonderful undergraduate programs. At the graduate level, we have a lot that we could do, and so I want to work on that. And then the third thing that I think is really important to focus on is diversity and inclusion. Berkeley and Haas don't look like the rest of California, and I think that that is something that we need to address. You didn't ask me what the thing was that surprised me the most about coming here, but I must say I was a little bit surprised at the lack of diversity particularly among the faculty who I've been spending a lot of time with. So that is a challenge. And there are other challenges associated with diversity and inclusion. At the Gender Equity Initiative that I attended on Thursday morning, the students did a phenomenal job. Was anybody at that? Any student who was there? So the students presented a fact that just blew me away. And I don't want to leave us on a negative note, but this fact really just blows me over, which is 10 years out, if you look at the salaries of our MBA graduates, for every dollar that a male MBA who graduated from the program is earning, women are earning only 57 cents. Doesn't that blow you away? It blows me away. So that's something that I think we should address. So that's my priorities.
Okay, fantastic. So on that, that's a really interesting number. And so I will just say that one of the things I was able to just come back from, I came back with a cold, so I've been trying to give all the airtime to Anne, but I was at the World Economic Forum, and the World Economic Forum does do a gender gap report each year. So you continue to see those kinds of differences in income. They tend to be associated with a number of things, and that it would be interesting to sort of look at these numbers. They tend to be associated with choice of occupation, part-time versus full-time, children, because one of the things we haven't talked about here, but there is still a very definite motherhood wage gap, motherhood. So basically the evidence from around the world, not just from the US, but from around the world, is that women, as they have children, tend to lose relatively in their wage position, oftentimes because they leave the workforce for a while and then go back. And by the way, on fatherhood, there's a premium. So basically, you tend to, if you become a father, you tend to see the wage, an additional wage bump up, whereas if you become a mother, there's a wage bump down. This suggests we got a whole bunch of work to do in terms of policy and also family dynamics, but I'll leave it at that. So, all right, so now some questions.
Personally, I'm thrilled you've come from Wharton, because so have I. It's a perfect place to land, Berkeley, I found. And it made me particularly upwardly mobile, as you were talking about earlier.
Yes, it's a good study.
And what I wonder, I know that Amy Gutman, the president at Penn,
Right.
Has a program where I think it preceded her with the previous woman president of Penn. It's becoming a maternal matriarchy. Anyway, that's great. The Penn integrates knowledge, they called it PIK. I don't know if that was still there when you were, but did you see things in that program that you'd find useful here? I know I spoke with Dr. Tyson about how you could integrate Haas and UCSF, and the geography is pretty tough. It's true, Wharton's in the city, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts on integrating departments or for joint degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we've all been working on that. We're starting that process, and just to give you a sense of the kinds of joint degree options that we're actually working on right now, even though I've only been here 4 weeks, we already have a proposal for a better joint degree program with the law school. There's one on the books, but nobody does it, partly because it's a 5-year program. So that's where we've got some proposals to fix that. We're a joint MBA, MA with the College of Natural Resources. We're starting that. I've resurrected a proposal that had foundered to create a joint program with the School of Public Policy. And there I'm really hoping that we could do it with both the full-time MBA program and the evening and weekend MBA program together with the School of Public Policy. So Henry Brady and I are in discussions on that. What else? Oh, Rich had initiated a really great program, Master's in Engineering School and the MBA, and we're proceeding with that. So that's almost approved. And then I love the idea of a medical school, a UCSF. At Wharton, in my classes, there were a number of students who were both doctors and were both in medical school and getting MBAs. That's a very powerful combination. I think that's a great idea as well. So we're moving along.
Hi, Dean. Matt Hines. I'm a second year in the full-time MBA program. I wanted to thank you for coming out today and sharing with us your thoughts as well as your priorities as you start off. And I especially appreciate the priority and the commitment to increasing, as you said, the number of faculty from diverse backgrounds and ethnicities. And I know we're focused on students as well. But to me, increase the number of students and faculty from diverse backgrounds, that is table stakes for becoming a leader and an innovator on diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I came to this institution thinking that Berkeley, Haas, this is a place that, if any, is going to be that leader, that innovator on work for business schools around the world on inclusion and diversity and equity. And so I guess my question to you is, do you think it is important for Haas and Berkeley to step up and become that leader? And if so, how might we go about doing that more than just, fixing this problem we have around numbers, but sustainably for the future?
I mean, absolutely. I think it's really important. What I don't know, so it's really easy to take two programs and say, let's combine them. It's much more challenging to figure out how, in a short term, medium term, and long term, create a truly diverse student body, faculty, staff, institution. But we're all working on it really hard. It's a top priority, and we're moving forward. As you know, because you were part of the action plan group, we have a really aggressive plan on a lot of different dimensions that we're really hoping will make a difference. But do come see me, do talk to me, do keep me accountable, and keep the whole management team accountable, because this is something we really intend to address going forward.
Hi, Dean. Thank you for being here. I'm Jessica from the first year full-time MBA program. And I wanted to ask a question about STEM extension. So, as you may know, more than 80% of international students want to stay here, but we only get the 30% chance of the lottery. So if we were to have a STEM extension, as other MBA programs do, like Kellogg or Booth, then we would have 2 more years of OPT, which would change the whole panorama for us, and also for newly admitted students. So how is that in the priorities that you're thinking now?
That's a good question. I had thought about STEM-related subject matter, but I hadn't thought about STEM extension. So, for example, if you do data analytics as a focus, that qualifies as a STEM field. But I am not so familiar with.
I'm actually not either. I don't know what the university's rules are on this, so I think it's an interesting thing to consider. While I was interim dean, it was never raised, so I haven't really thought very much about it. So I think we should look at what other schools are doing. Then the question becomes what is consistent with the University of California's own situation.
Yeah, I know that, sorry, the MBA representative for international students,
Right.
She would be working on it, so maybe there can be an action plan around it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what Wharton has done deliberately is they've branched out and expanded their concentrations in topics like data analytics, which can be STEM certified precisely for this reason. We actually do have programs. They're not in the full-time MBA program, but our MFE program has STEM, is STEM designated.
Okay.
So that's something that we should definitely look into.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you mentioned that there's three things might be interesting for MBA program: intrapreneurship, data analytics, climate change. So particularly on entrepreneurship, I just had this idea. Hope to hear your feedback on. I was thinking. So I went through partly through one of the most successful incubators. So I had some education there, definitely. Then I came to Haas, and I felt I got great education on entrepreneurship, on product design management, and things like that. I was thinking, like, if I were just to really bring that entrepreneurship education to practice, like, what about an idea where, by admitting into Haas, into this special program, the student go through all the classes, but then he starts his idea, and then the school kind of invests in him for like a larger percentage of the shares. And the student would go through the other curriculum. It's kind of the education. I would feel this would be a better approach to a traditional incubator, which is like more goal-oriented. Like, I was just thinking, if I ever become a really successful entrepreneur, I would give $100 million to Haas to do something like this. What do you think? Like, do you think that's potentially something that, I don't know, I just feel like there's a disconnect if you just do an incubator that is so profit-driven. And then at the same time, the entrepreneur really needs support, not from just running the business, but from like personal development. You know, I just feel like Haas is doing a better job than incubator, and might as well profit from, you know, the high potential of the people that we have here.
Mm-hmm. So this is a proposal for a kind of incubator. What you're suggesting is that doesn't exist here now. That I wasn't entirely clear what you wanted to create.
I've been thinking about the incubator model quite a bit. I think the value really provides, one is education, one is kind of a stamp of approval.
Yes.
And I think education in a very short period of time, which is what a typical incubator would provide, is not as great as a 2-year program.
Right. No.
I think here what we have here is great. And a stamp of approval point of view, like, it's really just like if you establish a brand name, people apply, the acceptance rate is low, then there's a stamp of approval that VCs really value. Then those two things really, I think business schools have a pretty good, you know, like, potential to do those two things. Potentially better than any standalone incubators. Just the idea.
I see. Okay.
Like,
does Wharton have any incubators they run?
I mean, they've received large gifts to create them.
To create incubators.
Yeah.
Right.
And to be honest, this is one of the things that we're talking about very intensively. Both providing new physical space as well as funding models and providing a kind of a central location on campus where people could go to get information about all the opportunities that are actually currently available. Mm-hmm. So that is something that we're talking about. And I'll be honest with you, the Haas board is very excited about this idea. And in part because we have a lot of entrepreneurs on the board. And so we're working with them closely on these possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Great. Any other questions? Well, we are actually at our ending time in any event. Oh, is there a question back there? I'm sorry, I just missed it. Sorry. Let's take this as the last question.
I was going to say there are cupcakes in the back. What? There are cupcakes. Hi, my name is Syed Rasool, and I'm a first-year part-time MBA student. And my question actually relates to the speaker series and discussions happening on campus. And so I think all of us in this room can comfortably agree that we're living in really politically trying times, whether it be in the United States or abroad as well. And I'm just curious to see what initiatives you're planning on taking to encourage more discussion, healthy discussion, around the political realm, around the economic environment that most of us are going to go and work in, and so that when we go out and are in a position to make impactful decisions, we're doing it with an ethical framework. So more along the lines of, just to hear your comments on along the lines of, wait, what kind of political discussion are we fostering? Or what kind of speakers are we planning on bringing in? Can we kind of set up a forum where there's more of an international discussion rather than just a discussion around technology or the local U.S. economy? So that's just what I had to.
Well, Laura, you just came back from Davos, so you can give us your perspective on this.
Well, I actually think it's the campus has many outlets for these kinds of discussions. So the first thing I would encourage you to do is to look around the campus to see what is available. That's number one. Number two, I mean, there are lots of student-initiated speaker series at Haas, and we could definitely work with you and others who, if you want to have more of a speaker series that focuses on international economic issues, for example, maybe we could add one. We do have a center, the Clausen Center, which runs where I've been at events here where they've had speakers. But again, one of the really important things about Haas is we do allow for lots of innovation, lots of student-led initiatives. We have a number of new courses in the diversity and inclusion area, which really grew out of student-run courses. So we basically start with that, sort of build up, find a faculty member, find a structure. So I would suggest that maybe, besides looking around the campus, I would suggest maybe thinking about what it is you think might be missing that you'd like to add, and then talking to us about how you might add it.
Thank you.
Did you see another question back there? No. Okay, well, it is our ending time, so I want to thank you all very much, and I'm going to turn this over to Courtney.
Yes. I also want to thank Anne and Laura for what a wonderful, engaging conversation. Laura, we so appreciate you being here today. And Anne, we're so excited to welcome you to Berkeley Haas, welcome you back to Berkeley, and as our new Berkeley leader, and to be working with you to make our school even stronger. I just wanted to say a quick happy Lunar New Year to our alumni and our guests here in the room, and to wish everyone best wishes for a prosperous year of the pig. I think this is a wonderful graphic that was generated by our alumni relations team. So.